Morning, friends. My name is Sarah, and some of you know me from Gladstone because I used to be a teacher there, and now I work at CIPD, so I'll see you at lots of different schools when we are back in the buildings. Today, I get to read you a story, and it's one of my favorite books. And when we're reading today, we are going to be talking about a strategy called retelling. When we're talking about retelling, we're telling the important parts of a story in order. We want to make sure we tell them in order. Today we're going to read a book called The Grumpy Monkey. And when we're reading today, we're going to pay close attention to the order that the things happen in the story so we can retell the important parts when we're finished. This story is called Grumpy Monkey by Susanna Lang, illustrated by Max Lang. Remember, Susanna Lang is the author, so she writes the story. And Max Lang is the illustrator, so he draws the pictures. The Grumpy Monkey. One wonderful day, Chimpanzee woke to discover that nothing was right. The sun was too bright, the sky was too blue, and the bananas were too sweet. Jim was confused. What's going on? Maybe you're grumpy, suggested Norman from next door. I'm not grumpy, Jim insisted. On his walk, he met Marabou. Jim's grumpy, Norman told Marabou. Well, why are you so grumpy, Jim? Asked Marabou. It's such a wonderful day. Grumpy? Me? I'm not grumpy, said Jim. But look at how you're standing, Marabou said. It's true, said Norman. You're all hunched. So Jim loosened up. Then he ran into Lemur. Jim's grumpy, Norman told Lemur. Why are you grumpy, Jim? Asked Lemur. It's such a wonderful day. Grumpy? Me? I'm not grumpy, said Jim. Well, your eyebrows look grumpy, said Lemur. It's true, said Norman. They're all bunched up. So Jim raised his brows. Then he tripped over Snake. Oh, no, said Norman. That's the last thing you want to do when you're feeling grumpy. Grumpy? Me? I'm not grumpy, said Jim. Then why that frown, said Snake. I think it's because he tripped over you, Norman whispered to Snake. So Jim put on a smile. Finally, Jim looked happy. But he didn't feel happy inside. Everyone wanted Jim to enjoy this wonderful day. You should sing with us, said the birds. Jim didn't feel like singing. You should swing with us, said the monkeys. Jim did not feel like swinging. You should roll with us, said the zebras. Jim didn't feel like rolling. You should stroll with us, said the peacocks. Jim didn't feel like strolling. You should lie in the grass. You should stomp your feet. You should take a bath and make it splash. You should hug someone. You should laugh. You should nap. You should eat old meat or some honey. You should jump up and down. You should sit in the sun. You should dance. But Jim didn't feel like doing any of that. Why are you grumpy, Jim? Asked the others. It's such a wonderful day. I'm not grumpy, shouted Jim as he beat his chest. And so he stormed off. Jim felt sorry. A little sorry for shouting at everyone, but mostly sorry for himself. I guess I am grumpy, Jim sighed. And just as he was starting to feel really sad, he came upon Norman. Norman was slumped. His eyebrows were bunched up and he was frowning. What's the matter? Are you grumpy? Asked Jim. No, I dance with porcupines, said Norman. Are you okay? Asked Jim. It hurts, but I'll probably feel better soon enough, said Norman. Are you still grumpy? Yes, said Jim, but I'll probably feel better soon enough too. For now, I need to be grumpy. It's a wonderful day to be grumpy, said Norman, and Jim agreed. And he already felt a little bit better. So now we want to think about retelling the story. And one thing that good readers do before they retell is they go back and they think about what they just read. So let's go back and think about our story. So if we start at the beginning, we remember that Jim was confused and all of his friends are saying, "Why are you so grumpy? Why aren't you happy, Jim?" And then In the middle of the story, his friends try to cheer him up. Remember, the birds try to get him to sing. The lion tries to get him to lay in the grass. They try to get him to eat some old meat. And then Jim gets really, really angry. And he storms off. And he's mad. And then at the end, he sees his friend Norman. And they are grumpy together. All right, so let's see if we can write down some of our ideas. In the beginning of the story, I remember that first Jim is grumpy and his friends try to cheer him up. So let's write that over here. Jim is grumpy and his friends try to cheer him up. And then in the middle of the story, Jim gets very mad and he yells at his friends and he storms off. So next, Jim gets really mad and he storms off. And at the end of the story, Jim sees his friend Norman and they sit together in the tree and they're grumpy together. So Jim sees his friend Norman and they are grumpy together. So we retold our story, Grumpy Monkey. Remember, when you're reading your books at home, you need to read them, go back through and think about your story, and then retell your friends or your sister or your brother or your mom or your dad. I'll see you guys next week for another story.
Good morning and welcome. Today we're going to talk about English language arts for 3rd through 6th grade. And we're also going to be sharing a story. So if you're in a different grade, you could join us as well. My name is Sherry Easton and we're going to get started with this book called Every Living Thing by Cynthia Ryland. It's one of my favorites. You can tell because it's all worn on the edges. I've read it several times. It's one of my favorites. I love every story in here is about an animal. We're going to use one of the stories in here called Papa's Parrots, and we're going to use that story to learn about how characters, the kind of thinking they do. We always know when we study characters that we look at what they do, the actions the character takes, right? So then we think about what the character says or that dialogue. We always know we analyze that. Today we're going to analyze a special thing. It's called the inner monologue, and that's the stuff that the character is thinking, that the reader knows and the character knows, but the other characters don't know. So it's called inner monologue. And I'm going to show you today how a reader thinks about that character's inner thinking or inner monologue. Ready? We're going to read Papa's Parrot. Though his father was fat and merely owned a candy and nut shop, Harry Tillian liked his papa. Harry stopped liking candy and nuts when he was around 7. But in spite of this, he and Mr. Tillian had remained friends and were still friends the year Harry turned 12. For years after school, Harry had always stopped in to see his father at work. Many of Harry's friends stopped there too, to spend a few cents choosing penny candy from the giant tins. I'm picturing this in my head. Are you picturing it? Harry's father owns a candy and nut shop. Are you picturing that? And all the boys and girls, all of Harry's friends are all there, crowded in the shop, sharing candy and nuts. I would love to spend my afternoons after school at a candy shop. How about you? Let's see what happens when Harry turns 12. Mr. Tillian's latest batch of roasted peanuts they would sample. Mr. Tillian looked forward to seeing his son and his son's friends every day. He liked the company. He looked forward to the company. When Harry entered junior high school, though, he didn't come by the candy and nut shop as often, and nor did his friends. They were older and they had more spending money, so they went to the burger place or they played video games at the arcade. They shopped for records, and none of them were very much interested in candy and nuts anymore, so they didn't come by the candy shop anymore. A new group of children came to Mr. Tillion's shop now, but not Harry Tillion and not his friends. Oh, I'm sensing a problem. Are you sensing it with me? I'm thinking that maybe Harry's dad was getting used to Harry and his friends coming by every day. Remember, it said he looked forward to the company. He liked the company. And now all of a sudden they're not coming by anymore because they're grown. They're about 12 and 13 and they're not coming by the shop anymore. Do you suppose Harry's dad is going to get lonely? I wonder if he is. Let's find out. The year Harry turned 12 was also the year Mr. Tillion got the parrot. He went to a pet store one day and bought one for more money than he could really afford. He bought the parrot to his shop, set its cage near the sign for Maple Cluster Candies, and named it Rocky. Rocky the parrot. Now, Harry thought this was the strangest thing his father had ever done. See that inner thinking? Harry's thinking, what is my dad doing? Buying a bird. Who buys a bird? Harry's thinking his dad's weird, right? Harry thought this was the strangest thing his father had ever done, and he told him so. But Mr. Tillion just ignored Harry and thought, nope, I like Rocky. Rocky was good company for Mr. Tillion. When business was slow, Mr. Tillion would turn on a small color television he had sitting in the corner of the shop, and he and Rocky the parrot would watch the soap operas together. That's a funny scene in your mind. Did you picture that? Did you picture Harry's dad and the parrot watching the soap operas together? That makes me kind of chuckle inside. How about you? Yeah. Rocky liked to scream when the romantic music came on, and Mr. Tillion would yell at him to shut up, but they seemed to enjoy themselves bickering back and forth, man and bird. The more Mr. Tillion grew to like his parrot, the more he talked to it instead of to people, and the more this happened, the more embarrassed Harry became. Can you picture that, what Harry's thinking in his mind again, that inner thinking? Harry must be thinking, my dad has lost it. My dad is talking to a bird. He's gone crazy. Oh my goodness. The more embarrassed Harry would become. Harry would stroll past the shop on his way to somewhere else, and he'd take a quick look inside to see what his dad was doing. He'd peek in the windows, and Mr. Tillion was always talking to Rocky the bird. So Harry kept walking and never stopped. He wouldn't want to stop and talk to his dad when his dad was talking to a bird. At home, things were different. At home, Harry and his father joked with each other at the dinner table as they always had, Mr. Tillion teasing Harry about his smelly socks, and Harry teasing Mr. Tillion about his blubbery stomach. At home, things seemed all right. But one day, Mr. Tillion became ill. He had been at work unpacking boxes of caramels when he grabbed his chest and fallen over on the top of the candy. A customer had found him, and he was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Mr. Tillion couldn't leave the hospital. He lay in bed with tubes in his arms, and he worried about his shop. New shipments of candy and nuts would be coming. Rocky would be hungry, and who would take care of these things? Harry said that he would. He promised. Harry told his father he would go to the store every day after school and unpack the new boxes of candy and nuts, and he would sort out all the candy and nuts, and he would even feed Rocky. But he wasn't going to talk to the bird, he said. So the next morning, Mr. Tillion lay in his hospital bed, and Harry took the shop key to school with him. After school, he left his friends and walked to the empty shop all alone. Now, I wonder what he's thinking, because he probably wants to be with his friends, but he knows he made this promise to his dad, right? So can you hear that inner thinking? He might be thinking, oh, I got to go to the candy and nut shop. I can't go to the burger place with my friends because I got to take care of the candy and nut stop. Yeah, he's probably thinking that in his head. Remember, that's called inner thinking or inner monologue. After school, he left his friends and walked to the empty shop all alone. In all the days of his life, Harry had never seen the shop closed after school. Harry didn't even remember what the closed sign looked like in the window. The key stuck in the lock 3 times, and inside he had to search all the walls for the light switch. It was like he'd never been there. It had been so long. The shop was as his father had left it. Even the caramels were still spilled on the floor where his father had dropped them. Harry bent down and picked them up one by one, dropping them back into the boxes of caramels. The bird in its cage watched him silently. Harry opened the new boxes his father hadn't gone to, peppermints and jawbreakers and toffee creams and strawberry kisses. Harry traveled from bin to bin, putting the candies where they belonged. Hello! Harry jumped, spilling a box of jawbreakers. You know, he's thinking in his head now, he's thinking, what was that? Who's talking? Hello, Rocky! Harry stared at the parrot, realizing it was him that was speaking. He'd forgotten it was there. The bird had been so quiet, and Harry had only been thinking of putting the candy away. "Hello." "Hello," Harry said. "Hello, Rocky," answered the parrot. Harry walked slowly over to the cage. The parrot's food cup was completely empty. Its water was dirty, and the bottom of the cage was a mess. Harry carried the cage to the back room. "Hello, Rocky," Rocky said. "Is that all you can say, you dumb bird?" Harry mumbled. The bird said nothing else. Harry cleaned the bottom of the cage, refilled the food and water cups, and then put the cage back in its place and resumed sorting the candy. He got busy working on the candy when he heard, "Where's Harry?" Harry looked up. "Where's Harry?" Harry stared at the parrot. "Where's Harry?" Chills ran down Harry's back. What could the bird mean? It was like something from the Twilight Zone. "Where's Harry?" the bird said. Harry swallowed and said, I'm here, you stupid bird." "You stupid bird," said the parrot. "You stupid bird. Where's Harry?" Well, at least he's got one thing straight, thought Harry. Miss him. Where's my Harry? You stupid bird," Rocky said. Uh-oh, I'm going to read that part again, because listen to this. Miss him, where's Harry? You stupid bird," Rocky said. Now, I happen to know about parrots. Parrots only say what they've heard lots of times. They say what they repeat what someone said to them. They don't say new words, they repeat things. So when Rocky says, "Miss him, where's Harry? I miss him," he's repeating someone's words. He's heard someone say, "Where's Harry? I miss him." Which we know, if we stop and think, boys and girls, we know that must have been Harry's dad. So Harry's dad has been asking Rocky, "Where's Harry? I miss him." Harry stood quietly with a handful of peppermints. "What?" he asked the bird. "Where's Harry? Miss him," said the parrot. "I'm here, you stupid bird, I'm here," Harry yelled. He threw the peppermints at the cage, and this bird screamed and clung to its perch. Harry sobbed, "I'm here, I'm always going to be here." And then he started tears crying down his cheeks. I bet if I think now, it doesn't say this, but I bet I can infer what Harry's thinking. Harry's realizing that it's his dad that's been talking about missing him and asking where he is. And now Harry's feeling bad because he's not been coming by the dad's shop to visit the dad very often, right? So he's probably feeling a little guilty. Let's see what happens. Harry sobbed, I'm here. I'm always going to be here." Now the tears were coming hard. Harry leaned over the class counter. "Oh, Papa," Harry buried his face in his arms. "Where's Harry?" repeated the bird. "Where's Harry?" Harry sighed and wiped his face on his sleeve. He watched Rocky the parrot. He understood now. Someone had been saying for a long time, "Where's Harry? I miss him." And that someone must have been his dad. Harry finished his unpacking, then swept the floor of the shop. He checked the furnace so the bird wouldn't get cold. Oh, look, now he's caring about Harry. He thought Rocky was a stupid bird, but now Harry's caring about Rocky. So he checked the furnace so the bird wouldn't get cold. Then he turned off the lights and left to go visit his papa at the hospital. "I'm coming, Papa," he said. What'd you think? Always makes me sad a little bit. Always makes me want to call my mom or dad. You know? So that is what we do when a reader thinks about when a reader thinks about what a character is thinking inside their head, right? Sometimes readers have to think, what is the character thinking inside? What is the character thinking that's not written down? Remember how we had to see how Harry was thinking about what Rocky was saying when he was saying, "Where's Harry? I miss him." We had to kind of guess or infer what was going on in Harry's inner thinking in his brain. Readers do that all the time. Readers stop and think about what characters do, what characters say, and most importantly, they stop and think about what characters think. Remember, that's called inner monologue, what the character is thinking, right? Parents, when you're working with your kids, if they're reading a book to you, a narrative with a character, ask them, take some time and stop and ask them, what is the character thinking and how do we know what that character is thinking? And kids, when you're reading, stop and make sure you ask yourself, what is the character doing? What is the character saying? And what is the character thinking? And how do you know what they're thinking? Okay, so that was ELA for today, guys. So today, remember, we learned about how to really think about what a character is thinking inside in their inner monologue. And next time when we think, we're gonna look at analyzing characters based on all three things: doing, saying, and what they're thinking. Next time we come together, we're gonna read the story "The Summer My Father Was 10."
Good morning, Kansas City. Welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom. I'm your English coordinator for Kansas City Public Schools, Chris Odom. I'm excited to work with you today. Today we're going to talk about poetry and characterization. We're going to feature the work of the person on the screen here. This is me. I got to meet Elizabeth Acevedo 2 times in my life already. Before she became the award-winning author that she is photoed here at NCTE, she also got to come and work with us, and we were so lucky at Paseo Academy, where she taught my class one day, along with Phil Kay. So, let's look at this quote from Elizabeth Acevedo. We're going to explore characterization a little bit through some of her amazing narrative poems in this book called The Poet X. But here's a quote that really says something to me. Let's just start there and think about it. Write the stories you've always wanted to read. Allow yourself to be the main character of your narrative. Become both the window and the mirror for those who read your work. Lean into fear. Write the hard poem. Seems like amazing advice from one of America's newest and most award-winning authors. Okay, today we're going to talk about characterization. We're going to learn about Elizabeth Acevedo. I'm going to do 5 poems from her book, and we're going to relay those back to talking about how we heard character as an example in each of the poems. And we're going to apply our definition of characterization, and then, again, look for specific details in the book that help us come to those conclusions. Okay, Elizabeth Acevedo is the youngest child and only daughter of Dominican immigrants. She started her work in the slam circuit as a performance poet, where she gained a lot of national attention and became slam champion. She's also a Cave Canem fellow and a National Book Award winner for this book, The Poet X. I was there at NCTE to see her featured on the panel along with some major national authors like Sharon Draper, and she just fit right in and told the story as if she'd been there for 20 or 30 years, but really she's just come into the national grouping with these authors in the last 4 or 5 years. This book has become a national hit, obviously. Okay, so characterization is the way an author portrays the traits of a person of focus in their writing. When you're writing a story about a character, you don't necessarily just tell everybody what everybody is about or what they are like. You have them discover that by planting details, by making them have certain actions or even inactions. Things you would want them to do that they don't do might define their character. You would hear them speak and they would have some dialogue. And often what people say, really reveals an awful lot about who they truly are. That's why we often quote people when we're talking about political figures or people that we might try to see what they stand for. We really go precisely into the dialogue and the language that they use. Same thing happens when we think about characters. When they make decisions and behaviors, again, characters are actively living in these books, so we want to think about them of why the author had them decide what they did, or what does it reveal about them because they did make that decision. And then certainly there are descriptive details about people's appearances, as how they feel about their appearance or how other people feel about their appearance is often a large factor in the characterization of the people that you read about in books. Okay, oftentimes characterization might surround some of these words, and I really like this image because really some of these qualities that you see portrayed here seem like some of the best things that we could ever build in each other and in people. So let's talk for a moment about this picture. When you're reading a book, what do you hope to see in a character when you choose the story? Are you looking for a certain personality? Are you looking that they might have had certain experiences? Do you rely on the reputation of maybe even the book or the author? Really, do you study the character's behavior? And is that what you're going to want to find out the most about when you select a book? So these are some good words that might help you think about characterization that isn't just on the surface of a person's being, which are the really sometimes least revealing bits of information that you would use about understanding a person. Notice that some of these we might see reflected in things more of how you do or act than just how you appear. Look, appearance and image is really small up there. I wonder if there's a reason. Okay, so let's apply it to the text. I'm going to read best I can some of the poems that are at the beginning of this novel. And what's neat is that this is considered a novel, even though there's my autographed version of my own copy. I can prove I really did get to meet her. And I'm still impressed with her work, every bit of it when I read it. So let's start with this first poem. What's neat is the book says it starts on August 24th. Today we're making this recording on August 26th. So we're kind of starting it up as it is the time of year even for this book that we would read it together. Okay, it's called Stoop Sitting. This is the first poem in her book. Let me read one thing before we hear the first poem. The very part one, she says, part one, in beginning was the word. Okay, stoop sitting. The summer is made for stoop sitting, and since it's the last week before school starts, Harlem is opening its eyes to September. I scope out this block I've always called home, watch the old church ladies, chanchaletas flapping against the pavement, their mouths letting loose a train of island Spanish as they spread he said, she said. Peep Papote from down the block as he opens the fire hydrant so the little kids have a sprinkler to run through. Listen to honking cabs with bachata blaring from their open windows. Compete with basketballs echoing from the little park. Laugh at the viejos, my father not included, finishing their dominoes tournament with hard slaps and yells of Capicu. Shake my head as even the drug dealers posted up near the building smile more in the summer, their hard scowls softening into glue-eyed stares in the direction of the girls in summer dresses and short shorts. Ayo, Xiomara, you need to start wearing dresses like that. Shh, you'd be wiped up before ever going back to school, especially knowing you church girls. But I ignore their taunts, enjoy this last bit of freedom, and wait for the long shadows to tell me when Mommy is almost home from work, when it's time to sneak upstairs. Okay, so that's the first piece, and perhaps it revealed something about the character of the protagonist. It sounds like this story is going to be told from first-person point of view. So we're going to try to understand this narrative, it sounds like, through the character that's speaking in this first poem. Let's think about who is Xiomara Batista as I keep reading another one for you. Did that last poem help you understand a little bit about her, where she comes from, what she does every day, who she deals with, how she remains strong, and how she identifies with this place that she comes from? Okay, next poem is called Mira Muchacha. Mira Muchacha is Mommy's favorite way to start a sentence, and I know I've already done something wrong when she hits me with, look, girl. This time it's, Mira Muchacha. Marina from across the street told me that you were on the stoop again talking to los vendedores. Like usual, I bite my tongue and don't correct her, because I hadn't been talking to the drug dealers, they'd been talking to me. But she says she doesn't want any conversation between me and those boys, or any boys at all. And she better not hear about me hanging out like a wet t-shirt on a clothesline, just waiting to be worn, or she would go ahead and be the one to wring my neck. Oíste, she asks, but walks away before I can answer. Sometimes I want to tell her the only person in this house who isn't heard is me. Okay, that was Mira Muchacha. Does that help you understand who is Xiomara Batista? Okay, this one's called Names. I'm the only one in the family without a biblical name. Xiomara isn't even Dominican. I know because I Googled it. It means one who is ready for war. And truth be told, that description is about right, because I even tried to come into the world in a fighting stance, feet first. Had to be cut out of Mommy. After she'd given birth to my twin brother, Javier, just fine, and my name labors out of some people's mouths in that same awkward and painful way, until I have to slowly say, Xiomara. I've learned not to flinch the first day of school as teachers get stuck, stupid, trying to figure it out. Mami says she thought it was a saint's name, gave me this gift of battle, and now curses how well I live up to it. My parents probably wanted a girl who would sit in the pews, wearing pretty florals and a soft smile. They got combat boots and a mouth silent until it's sharp as an island machete. Okay, again, another piece that might reveal some more that you could talk about Xiomara's characterization and how the poet, author, Elizabeth Acevedo, is helping us discover what Xiomara is all about. Okay, I'm going to do one more. I really like this poem, and I love how it's a blend in both Spanish and English, and there's a talent definitely there when someone is able to write in two languages, multiple languages, that really makes the beauty come about in this writing even more. Okay, so again, we're going to go back and look a little bit more closely, and on this poem, let's think about which details the author includes to help us best understand about the character. This is called the first words. Pero tú no eres fácil is a phrase I've heard my whole life. When I come home with my knuckles scraped up, pero tú no eres fácil. When I don't wash the dishes quickly enough, or when I forget to scrub the tub, pero tú no eres fácil. Sometimes it's a good thing when I do well on an exam, or the rare time I get an award. Pero tú no eres fácil. When my mother's pregnancy was difficult, and it was all because of me, because I was turned around and they thought I would die, or worse, that I would kill her. So they held a prayer circle at church, and either Father Sean showed up at the emergency room, Father Sean, who held my mother's hand as she labored me into the world, and Poppy paced behind the doctor, who said this was the most difficult birth she'd been a part of. But instead of dying, I came out wailing, waving my tiny fists. And the first thing Poppy said, the first words I ever heard, pero tú no eres fácil. You sure ain't an easy one. Okay, let's finish out this lesson today thinking about why the author chose to tell the story with this character. Why do you suppose Xiomara will become our protagonist, and in this case, the narrator of the story as it continues? It seems like there must be a reason, as it's told from her point of view, and she's revealing a lot of very personal things about her upbringing and how she sees herself, just to get us started with the story. I also want you to wonder, and then turn that wonder into prediction. Based on what you found out today while I was reading, what do you think will happen to the main character later in the story? And it would be great to hear what details you decided to help you come to that conclusion. What did you notice? What might you jot down about the characters and what they were doing in the story? Or what she was saying about what she had been doing or hadn't been doing when her mommy would ask her? What actions, dialogue, or descriptions, or inner thoughts were revealed about the character that we are discovering today? Okay, remember, characterization is all about some of the parts that helped you decide who Xiomara is. It was also about the things that were unheard. She felt a little bit unheard. She felt unable to hide. She felt a sense of her own fierceness. She seems to feel spiritual about the world in the way that she captures it in her poetry, especially. And I would again say that I can see where she's defining herself as someone who's artistic. Okay, if we went back and looked for quotes that support that, I think you'd be able to find a good number of them. And we've really only read 4 poems. Okay, I hope you are excited and interested in hearing more about this book. We'll keep going with the narrative down the line and read this some more on this KCPS Homeroom edition. Next week, we'll probably talk about setting and the influence that setting has as we start to understand Xiomara and the story that's going to lay itself out for us. Thanks again. Again, we're featuring the wonderful work of Elizabeth Acevedo, and have a great day.
Superintendent Bedell here with a quick message about our KCPS reopening plans. We wanted to provide you with some high-level pieces of information so that you as parents and students will have a good understanding of how we will return to school on September 8th with our distance learning model or our Kansas City Virtual Academy model. Now, while we've made every effort to try to have our students back in person at the beginning of the year, we've been in connection with the Kansas City Health Department, additional health officials, the mayor's office, and the county, all of who are each guiding us to take the distance learning or virtual approach to start this school year off due to the increasing number of positive COVID-19 cases in our area. So as a parent and as a student, here are a few things we want you to know. Number one, you have options. Our plan will allow for students and families to choose the Kansas City Virtual Academy or our distance learning option. The Virtual Academy is an option that will allow for your child to interface on a virtual platform for the entirety of the first semester. At the end of that semester, families will have an opportunity to opt back into in-person should they choose to do so if the district has moved back into that model or that mode of teaching. Our distance learning option already comes with the intent to return to in-person when it is safe to do so, which means that our students will more than likely operate on a hybrid schedule of an A-day, B-day schedule to ensure that we are practicing social distancing properly. Number two, expectations. Students are expected to participate daily, and grading will no longer be held harmless as it was during the months of April and May. Number three, schedules. Teachers will have a schedule and will deliver instruction with the whole class and with individual students. Students need to participate daily and complete assignments. Number four, attendance. Attendance will be taken daily, and students are expected to log in daily. The login and completion of assignments will be used to take attendance. This is very critical because it impacts the district's funding. It also impacts the district's accountability rating according to the state of Missouri. Number five, assistance. Our staff will be here to provide assistance to students and parents. That not only includes school-based staff and faculty, that includes central office staff. Information regarding our parent university, our Lawn and Learns, and our orientations will be forthcoming in the very near future. Finally, I want to close out by saying how sincerely appreciative we are for your partnership with KCPS. As an administrator and as a parent, these are difficult times, but here's what I can assure you. With all of the uncertainty, we have a phenomenal opportunity in front of us to reimagine, to redesign, and to truly develop a school system while in the midst of a global pandemic will do much better in serving all of our students, regardless of racial background, socioeconomic status, or immigration status. And we need to come together as a community to make this happen because we want Kansas City to be a great city for all. In closing, we are here to support you and care for our students throughout all of our phases of reentry. And we will continue to communicate with you thoroughly so that you know what is going on. Thank you for joining us in our educational journey. This is Superintendent Bedell checking out.
Good morning, Kansas City. Welcome to another edition of KCPS Homeroom. I'm Chris Odom, your ELA coordinator for Kansas City Public Schools. Today we're going to follow up on our series about the writing process, jump right into some strategies you could develop for planning. A lot of times students probably are convinced that planning is something they can do later on. And the irony of that is really planning is better done before you get started, because you're going to save yourself some energy and frustration and probably have a better outcome. A lot of school has taught me this after going through 3 different degrees. The exciting thing are the things that you really realize what you're doing better by the time that you're finishing up graduate school. You really could have applied all of those things much earlier in your career, but it takes a long time to really get that in your system. And really make use of it instead of act like it's just another step you have to do. So trying to encourage you before we even go anywhere further. You may have heard a lot about planning. You heard a lot about outlining. I was against it myself quite a bit because I like the spontaneity of things. But let me tell you, outlining can help you use that instead of just have it. Okay, so today we're going to discuss some strategies. You've already heard me talking a little bit about one. And we're going to model how to develop a thesis and what we call a working outline. And you're not putting pressure on yourself to make your outline extremely formalized and perfect yet. If you need to do that for a teacher, that is something down the road to do. Right now you're making something that's far more tentative and will be developed more as you go. Okay? We're also going to set you out with that as your goal, is that I'm going to ask you to go off planning. Remember, you've been developing a topic and coming up with some of the resources that you might start your research on last time. And this time we're really solidifying the thesis so that you can say in one sentence exactly what you're trying to accomplish by doing this project and really get you started on putting together the organizational pattern you're going to select to go forward. Okay, so here some of the strategies again that I've tried to use have come from as far back as my wonderful high school teachers. I had a chair in college that was one of my most useful in my undergraduate days, that was really set up where you put your knees underneath you. It was kind of like you were in a praying posture, and you were perched there, and it was a computer chair with wheels and it rolled around. But I would never get in that chair other than to write. And eventually it became so useful that I really am certain my body knew it was time to just go, and there was nothing else for me to do there, and it wasn't super comfortable, but it was a way I could really lock in and focus. So I would keep that chair around. I don't have one of those these days. I use, a different just office chair, but I found that I needed something to help me really focus. I would also put on headphones. I'm sure some of you probably do that in your day-to-day, so you can be kind of private and aware. I would be considerate of what kind of music I was listening to, usually something that I could kind of stop paying attention to. It was just an accompaniment in the background, something that didn't have a lot of words, and not for sure pop or hard rock or something that would be more of a distraction. Okay, so sometimes the chair was a factor. Sometimes not being super comfortable, like laid out in a real comfy posture in your bed, may not be the best way to actually get some work done. Okay, so maybe you have a special spot that you've developed for writing. It's helpful. During this distance learning, I have my desk up there, and that's where I go, and that's the only reason I go in there for the most part, or to pay bills. So what's up there waiting for me are all my supplies, some things that I've put around to help me stay motivated, some ways I've developed to help me stay organized, right? It's all in there ready for me when I go back to that room. I also suggest that you develop a ritual, not like where you chant around in the room and call for the spirits. You can do that if you like, but this is more like a system that you would put into place when you know you're telling your mind and your body to get ready. We're going to do some schoolwork here, and we're hoping to make some progress. I had a car when I was in high school that was my parents', but enough that I could go drive around. And sometimes my teacher then gave me the greatest advice. If you're stuck and you don't have an idea and you can't come up with your thesis and you've been reading and trying to figure out what to do, take a break, go for a drive, and don't come back until you have an idea. You do the same thing with a walk. But I do find that when I drive, some reason the change of setting has me thinking of all kinds of different ideas that I wasn't when I was just planted in that one room. Then I would feel it like, ooh, I have an idea. And just by coming back into the room, I knew I was going to make something happen and some progress was going to occur because I had, given myself a chance to figure out what it was. Sometimes relocating, going somewhere else, and coming back is a good way for you to have some clarity about what your plan is. And remember, we're still developing this plan, so you don't have to have it all the way, but it's helpful when you sort of got an idea. Okay, so as we develop a thesis statement, some tips for doing so. Quite often these are the sentence parts. It can be more than one sentence, but it's often trying to be as concise as can be, that the reader would take from you and have a clear understanding of what you were trying to prove or talk about in your work. Okay, it can be one sentence, it doesn't have to be. You try to limit it to something that you're going to be able to demonstrate with the evidence that you're going to provide. Okay, I think it works the best as the last sentence in your introductory paragraph. You are then sending us right into the main discussion when you start your body paragraphs. And sometimes the introduction is a chance for you to gain our focus and help us see where you're going. So if you gain our focus by the very end of the first introductory paragraph, you can start us off with a sense of confidence as we read that you are following the plan you just set forth in the very next step. You can provide a list of the paragraph topics that you follow. Often a thesis statement might have pieces, like you're going to talk about this first and then this. And then sometimes people call that more of a program or formulaic thesis. And then as you get older, you might break away from having a thesis that has those noticeable three parts, but that you think still creates an overarching goal for the reader. Okay, so again, the thesis helps us know exactly where you're going, and it's well placed up there early in your introduction, so it forces you to know before you write the thing. Okay, here's an example of my thesis statement, and then I highlighted some parts that were going to be what I'm going to be looking for as I create my organization. Okay, my thesis says, dog owners must consider many factors to best care for the various challenges that will present themselves. Down the road, there are so many that we have really been developing a lot of research on this topic, and every day there's some other topic really to help care for this young man, and he is a lot of work. Develops a new problem or a new concern that we immediately have to decide about how should we act in this moment. Okay, so when I start my outline based on that thesis statement, really early on I started it just from scratch, and then eventually I'm going to move toward formal. Remember, my thesis statement is leading the way and why I would have an outline at all. The benefits of having an outline are going to be the way that you are going to know your path before you start talking. And in some ways, this that I've put up here for you as slides serves as my outline as I walk you through my discussion. Without it, I would wander considerably more and be way off target and probably say things that didn't have anything to do with what I was trying to say. That helps because if I make this outline, and I'll show you a couple examples of what they might look like, my supporting details have a known purpose. Like I already know why they're there. And after working with writers and students for 16 years in the classroom, biggest question we often have is, why is this here? And that's something sometimes the person doesn't know. It's often because they haven't decided. It's often because they're not sure. And it often is because they didn't put enough thought into it for that to be evident to the people who are reading it. Things just seem here. I often call those dartboard quotes. Looks like you kind of backed up from it and threw them in there with a dart. Just no certainty about where they would appear, kind of like when you throw a dart. And students would feel that feedback kind of, you're right, that is kind of how I did that. And then they would need an outline so it didn't appear that way to the reader. Okay, so when I was looking at my thesis statement, in the center here are some of the elements, kind of like this three-prong approach that we were talking about could be part of your thesis. So I'm going to include the many factors related to raising a dog and the various challenges and the overall puppy's development. And inherent in that conversation will be ways I can meet the need of us also. And peace of mind and really having some certainty of what we're doing is the right way, even if it's not working initially. That way we don't just stop and change to a different path. I need to see this can work. I think that's really fun to look up examples and find out how old does this dog start to do a certain level of behavior. When should I expect him not to go in the house? When should I start working on leash training? And we find out these things simply by looking at some of the best sources. We talked about that last week, how to know if you're finding factual information. Okay, and the final topic is how we can obviously meet all the needs of the puppy. And if I were dividing this so far into my plan, you can see I've got a lot of things to get started looking into and researching and writing about. The final thought I would need to have is in what order I thought these three major topics would be best logically discussed. I don't think I'd want to start off with it being all about myself, because in a research paper where it's about the dog and the dog's pleasure as a life form, then why would I center it back on myself? So maybe this is what I finish out on, and maybe really these two just kind of work together at the beginning of the essay, because it seems like if I talk about meeting the needs of the puppy, it might show up in some of the positive, well-grounded examples of my buddy over there. Okay, so a working outline is a lot like a structure that you develop that becomes locked in like a pattern that you're going to use yourself. Again, you've seen something like this. I would encourage that your introduction starts off with background information and then wedges in that thesis statement. That's a smaller paragraph than sometimes your introduction. Oftentimes people put too much information in their introduction that would have been better served later on, right? As they develop their pattern, you can see how they might need to think of there's more going on in the body paragraph than there is the introduction in most writing forms. So I also use the comparison of how much more of your body there actually is than how much of your head. And if your head was the metaphor for your introduction of your essay, it's where we really figured out what was going on, then you can see how it's much smaller it still is in comparison to the rest of your body as an essay. Okay? So again, you would follow this paragraph form, this patterning that you develop, and it would repeat until you ran out of body paragraphs, until you ran out of evidence, and then you'd finish it off with a conclusion. And often we restate the thesis and the conclusion and recap with some final points. So what remember you're doing when you're really working through this process of outlining is going to improve the amount of time that you really allow for all of these things to occur. You can see on this side I'm saying your clarity of thinking is going to go up. You're going to have far more ability to sound like you know what you're talking about if you go through these steps and give them the adequate time. If I try to do these all the same moment, if I try to do this one before that one, or if I try to just jump here, you can see I probably have less clarity of thought. And that'll be noticeable, both how I feel about it and how confident my voice is while I'm writing, and again, how the people who perceive reading it might feel about it when they evaluate it. It's another really big help as you're writing college essays, because if you plot out a path and then talk about it, you get a lot more ideas that you can start adding to it when you're just not working on it also. Okay, because if I were to come back to this one and I needed to think of more ideas, then this could be a thing I was walking around with that day, trying to finish in my mind or solve when I looked at another book or a newspaper or something. I might get a new idea. So that's why it's a working outline. Okay, and if you really keep that process open, you're going to find more resources. They're going to find their way into your first draft while you're working on it. Okay, so what I want you to do now is to turn your research question into one sentence that includes all the factors you want to include. think about if you're going to use this three-part system where you say how it's this, this, or this. That's one way we can think about those three parts. You can see how I kind of have a system, but I'm also using it in a way that would say overarching what I'm going to talk about, but I still picked out in the highlighted portions what seemed like some of my paragraph topics. Okay, for next time, let's see if you could pull off working on this rough outline on a piece of paper or in your computer. Include your paragraph topics like I did mine, and start thinking about how the specific details from your research could go in those paragraphs. I also want you to think about, like we were talking about, the logical order you would follow for why your paragraphs would be in that order and why. Once you've got that nailed down, we're ready for next time. We're ready to start thinking about writing that first draft. I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm Chris Odom from the English coordinator at Kansas City Public Schools. I'm delighted to have you with me this morning. Have a great day.